Hello there. I simply have to have a rant about this Allison Pearson story, having Essex Police knock on her door on Remembrance Sunday and effectively chastise her, accuse her, ask her questions about a tweet that she put out there over 12 months ago and has since apologised for and deleted. And it turns out that the media and indeed centre-right political commentators are up in arms over the fact that the police should be focusing their time and effort on tweets, as we saw, of course, and have seen continually, particularly when it is those on the right of the political spectrum that post those tweets. The police and the establishment focusing on intimidating those individuals, without putting too fine a point on it, by chastising them and deterring them from their right to an opinion, their right to freedom of expression and free speech. Allison Pearson, of course, is a journalist for the Daily Telegraph. She had sent out a tweet where she, perhaps mistakenly, I'll let you be the judge of that, put a picture of what she believed were Palestinian protesters with police officers posing with them, and it seems that this is the tweet that is the potentially offensive one. She was remarking that there had been Israeli protesters previously that had asked to pose with police officers who'd said no, I guess because it would be seen by the force as being politically inappropriate. And I would agree with that. The police obviously don't want to be and should not be seen to be taking sides, policing without fear nor favour and all that. But she was remarking on the fact that it looked like there were some Palestinian protesters that were posing with the police, and the police were happy to do so. Now, it turns out that they actually were not, it seems, reading between the lines, Palestinian protesters, but actually supporters of a Pakistani political party. But that by the by, this video is not about whether I think Allison Pearson is right or wrong, or indeed whether she has committed a crime. This is about Essex Police. Now, I happen to know the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner of Essex Police, Mr. Roger Hirst. I served on Brentwood Council with him for a number of years. We did not see eye to eye. It won't surprise you to learn. Now, Mr. Hirst, over the last day or two, has gone on to LBC to defend Essex Police's position. He says Essex Police are not the thought police, and bearing in mind that Roger is a conservative with a large C, conservative with a big C, he says, no, we are just doing our job, and has defended the police and indeed the Chief Constable with regard to their investigation, their probing of Allison Pearson because of the tweet that she put out there. So what I really want to talk about in this video is the absolute outrage, the absolute hypocrisy, the great big stinking mess that Essex Police are with regard to the rate of crime in this county, the county that I happen to live in, and indeed the detection rate. Now, Roger Hirst, my old friend from Brentwood Council, was first elected as Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner in 2016, so 8 years ago. And what I want to do in this video is take a little look at what's happened to Essex under his tenure as Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, bearing in mind that obviously he is ultimately responsible for hiring the Chief Constable, signing off the budget, and indeed for strategy, so policy in effect. Not day-to-day policing, but the things that are put in place to ensure that policing in Essex is adequate. Policing by consent, making sure that the public feel protected. Well, unfortunately for Roger, in his 8-year tenure, whilst it seems that he and his force have been focused on journalists doorstepping and telling them off for saying hurty things, things that those with a particularly low bar of sensitivity in terms of their sensitivity threshold, those people are apparently offended by. So he has been focusing on those, and indeed it seems from a Daily Mail article today as well, has collated the grand total in recent months of 700 non-crime hate incidents that his officers have investigated. Frankly, how he can have the barefaced gall, the brass neck, to go on to a national radio station, a channel, to defend his position, saying, and I quote, the 1986 Public Order Act defines this. What he means by this is the Allison Pearson situation, the instance which she is being investigated for. It defines this as a crime. Now, we should have a real problem with this, apart from the fact that the police are knocking on journalists' doors and indeed other members of the public to tell them off and potentially prosecute them for having an opinion, for having the right to their own freedom of expression and freedom of speech. What Roger Hirst here is effectively saying is that Allison Pearson has committed a crime. Now, libertarians amongst you will realise that there is an old-fashioned approach, certainly in this country, in this democracy, which denotes that you are innocent until proven guilty, something that seems to have escaped Roger Hirst, which is surprising given that he is the Essex Police Fire and Crime Commissioner. So he says that she has committed a crime, which means presumably that she will see some kind of summary justice. And I guess, he presumably, from what he's saying, would also then like to see her fast-tracked through the justice system like many of the so-called far-right rioters were back in the summer. It seems very, very sinister indeed to me. I suggest that perhaps we should let lateral justice take its course. And if they see fit, which they shouldn't as a police force or a CPS, take Allison Pearson through the justice system by way of due process on the basis that she is, of course, innocent or proven guilty. But the other thing that I take issue with is the fact that he also says in his LBC interview that you can't go around, this is their police force, his police force, you can't go around ignoring crimes just because they're politically sensitive. Well, Roger, that's not what we are concerned about. What we are concerned about is that you and others like you as police and crime commissioners and chief constables are wasting time and resources on non-crimes, things that are hurty or offensive, things that should not be policed, the majority of these being non-crime hate incidents, although it's arguable that from what your officers said to Allison Pearson on their doorstep, that you're actually investigating this as a crime, a race crime, which seems, a step too far, but we'll let your process, the CPS and the justice process, be the judge of that ultimately. But here's the thing. The 1986 Public Order Act, of course, was written, funnily enough, in 1986, which I guess is why it's the 1986 Public Order Act, many, many years before the internet. So the fact that Roger Hirst, again, comes straight out of the blocks to defend his officers and his police force on the basis that a crime has definitely been committed. This statute, this legislation, was written before Twitter, before Facebook, before Instagram, before people were posting anything on the internet. The internet simply didn't exist. So we have a piece of legislation that seems to be relied upon here to try and catch out a journalist for having an opinion, which clearly wasn't written with regard to people posting so-called offensive and hurty things online, because online didn't exist. Okay, that aside, what I really want to talk about in this video is, whilst Roger Hirst and his chief constable and the rank and file have been ordered to go and tell off and threaten and intimidate journalists and members of the public for having thoughts and opinions, let's have a little look, shall we, at the state of Essex with regard to crime by way of offences committed, and indeed the detection rate in Essex since Roger Hirst took over as Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, which, as I say, was in 2016. So, and let's pick out the offences, the crimes that I think are particularly worrying, particularly significant and poignant, because of course what Roger Hirst and others will do is try to pick out bits of the data. Bearing in mind Roger Hirst actually is an ex-bank statistician, so he'll be very, very good at pulling out the little morsels of data that suit his cause. He will say, for instance, that crime has gone down year on year, which of course it has, but that depends what crime you're measuring and how you're measuring it. So let me focus on things that I think are rather important to most people in this country and indeed in my county, Essex, where I live. So firstly, let's have a look at violence, shall we? So the offence of violence against the person. When Roger Hirst took over in Essex, there were 30,829 offences in the 2016 year of violence. Very serious. Now, 8 years on, 58,723 offences. So that's an increase in violent offences in that 8 years since Roger Hirst has been in charge of Essex Police. That's an increase of 90%. Rape. I hate to talk about it, but we should. Why? Because in 2016 there were 1,026 offences of rape recorded in Essex. In 2024, 2,078 instances, 2,078 rape offences. That is a 103% increase in rape in Essex in the last 8 years. Drug offences, 2,750 offences in 2016, 5,437 offences in 2024. That's up 98%. Drug offences have doubled in 8 years. That's the number of offences being committed, stroke recorded. Of course, really recorded, because those that are carried out are not always recorded. Let's talk about detection. Pretty importantly, the detection rate of all crime in Essex right now is 14%, 14%. So in other words, only 14% of crimes actually end up with someone being brought to justice as a consequence of those crimes. That means that 86% of all crimes in Essex go undetected. So 86% of all crimes, no one is held to account, no one is brought to task 86% of the time. And let's just go through some specific crimes in terms of the detection rate and how, frankly, appalling some of the detection rates are. Again, whilst we're worried about knocking on doors for hurty words, detection of crimes of violence down 52% in the last 8 years to just 12%. So only 12% of violent instances are solved. Rape, down 68% in detection terms to just 3.5% of rapes are detected in that someone is held to account and brought through the judicial system as a consequence of an allegation of rape. Burglary, detection rates down 23% to just 6.7%. So what we're seeing here already is a significant increase in crimes over the last 8 years, a significant reduction in detection rates over the last 8 years. So what's all that cost us? What's all that cost the Essex council taxpayer? Well, I can tell you that in the last 8 years since Councillor Hirst, he is actually still a councillor in Brentwood as well, but Mr Hirst, the Police and Crime Commissioner, the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner for Essex, has increased his budget in the last 8 years by £98 million. £98 million. It's now £363 million per annum. He has increased it, therefore, in his tenure by £14 million per annum. So every year his budget has increased. He has taken more money effectively from the taxpayer to the tune of £14 million every year. Council tax increases on average every year for the last 8 years of 5%. In some years, his report actually states that he has sought to increase the rate of council tax, his police precept, by the maximum possible amount legally possible. So I leave you with this. Roger Hirst goes on radio and indeed television to talk about the fact that he thinks it's perfectly okay to focus officers' time and resources, and indeed therefore I guess the CPS ultimately, on such instances of sending out tweets that might offend, saying things that not everybody agrees with. He says they are crimes. He doesn't seem to know the difference between a real crime and a non-crime, a crime that really affects people, like having your house burgled or your car smashed up, or a loved one raped, or someone that goes down the wrong path because drugs seem to be so freely available and used in the county of Essex. So all of that stuff is thrown to one side, whilst Roger Hirst and his force focus on people like Allison Pearson, a journalist who is expressing an opinion. The detection rate of 14%, where violent and sexual offences in Essex have doubled over the last 8 years, at an increased cost of £98 million more to the taxpayer. So effectively, more money for more crime. It's not a great slogan for Councillor and Mr. Roger Hirst's Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner campaign when he stands for re-election in 3 or 4 years' time? Is it? Not very good. Let me know your comments underneath. I think this is frankly appalling, and if ever there was a demonstration of our police force and our police leaders, our chief constables, our police commissioners, our police and fire commissioners actually resetting and making sure that they focus on things that actually matter to the public and society in terms of keeping us safe and protected, then policing by consent, which frankly at the moment hangs in balance. If ever there was a demonstration of getting priorities wrong, this video with me focusing on Essex Police and Roger Hirst as Police and Fire and Crime Commissioner really, I think, puts the whole thing into a very, very sad, pathetic and quite angering perspective, don't you think? Let me know your comments. And if you like this stuff, by the way, please like this, please subscribe. Until the next time, I'm Russell Quirk.